I'm Eric from Longbox Review.
I'm Peter from the Daily Rios, and this is episode 23 of Eric and Peter's Legion Project Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Legion Project Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Peter.
And I am the other host, Eric.
Eric, welcome. Hello, how are you?
That's a loaded question right now, Peter. I am fine. I guess that's all I can really say, given the events of the world right now, as at the time that we are recording. Mm-hmm. So, how are you doing?
I feel the same. I feel. I think by the time people hear this episode, they will have heard a Daily Rios episode specifically talking about a lot of the current events and things on my mind. So they can certainly go and listen to that if they care to. But thankful to be able to have the privilege to be able to sit down and hit record with you and talk about the Legion.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So we are here to talk about issue number 23 of the Baxter run of the Legion of Superheroes, and I want to just quickly explain once again what we mean by the Baxter run, if we say that term, Baxter. I got an email, and unfortunately, the person who sends the email hasn't signed the email, and when I get the email from them, the name that pops up along with the actual email address changes sometimes between Scott and Dan. So I'm not sure what this person's name is. So I apologize about that. We've been having a few back and forth emails about topics outside of the Legion as well. So it's either Scott or it's Dan. So I apologize about that. So please let me know. I guess I should have asked in the email, so that's my fault. But they wanted to know, the terminology behind Baxter. And the name Baxter is kind of like an affectionate name for this series because it's the paper stock that this particular Legion volume is printed on. Same as New Teen Titans Volume 2, same as The Outsiders Volume 2 when it moved over from Batman and the Outsiders, or you can think of a series from DC like Camelot 3000, or when DC in the 80s was doing reprints of Jack Kirby's New Gods, or of the Green Lantern Green Arrow series by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams when they were doing reprints of that. By the way, we just lost Neil Adams. Not Neil Adams, my God.
Yeah.
Denny O'Neil in the past week.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
What a loss.
Yeah. So that's what we mean by Baxter. Now, DC referred to it as their deluxe format, right?
Didn't that come later, shortly after that, though? Well, I can't remember now.
I think I was reading one of the Meanwhile columns, or even the issues that we're reading now. And when you look at the checklist, it does say deluxe, DC
That's
checklist
true.
Deluxe.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe they flip-flop between new format and deluxe. But I know that there was something called new format later.
Yes.
And that was kind of like a softer Baxter paper or something in between Newsstand and Baxter. It was weird.
I hated it.
Yeah. So Baxter paper, it's very white. It's very vibrant. Um, some people tend to think it has a gloss to it, but I've never had that experience.
No,
Um,
I wouldn't describe it as gloss for sure.
yeah, some people say, when you look at it, it's like it's too shiny. I'm like, I guess in certain angles maybe,
And
but
I think that has more to do with the ink rather than the paper itself.
right, because it does have kind of like a matte quality to
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah,
it's
exactly.
grainy,
Hmm.
So I just call it the Baxter Run. That's kind of, and I think you're the same way. I
Oh yeah,
think.
yeah. It's funny because I remember when these the Baxter books started coming out back in the early '80s, and I there was a meanwhile column where they discussed that. And I think we have talked about that meanwhile column specifically on the show. I don't remember which episode, but probably because of that, myself and my friends who were reading the Legion and the New Teen Titans and other books, we just started calling it the Baxter comics, the Baxter versions, to distinguish them from the newsstand versions. So,
Mhm.
and it just kind of stuck. And I always thought of it as sort of a thing we did. And then it was only years later when I realized, oh no, everybody else does this too.
Other titles like Infinity Inc. Um,
Omega
there's an
Men,
at what's that?
Omega Men too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And then Vigilante, that series, and a couple other series had it, and they were specifically sold. Here's another kind of way to know which how you can delineate the series that falls under the Baxter category. They were specifically only sold to direct market. So you couldn't find these at a newsstand. Was that your experience?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have actually in my little podunk hometown in northern Idaho, we had a fledgling comic shop. It was a comic book slash used book slash music store, and that was my first encounter with a direct market comic book shop.
Right. I can remember walking into my first comic store. It was called Hildebrand's, and um, my sister took me. My older sister, she took me to the store, and uh, I'm fairly certain it's where I picked up um, the New Teen Titans Baxter volume, the earlier issues that I had missed because I was getting it from in the mail, but I think by the time I ordered it, it was already up to issue 3. So I needed issues 1 and 2. And then along the wall, there was a sign that said sale on Omega Men comics. And they had them all splayed out. I think it was probably up to issues 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. And I just randomly picked up a bunch of Omega Men comics because of that. And then I picked up some other books as well. But those were some of my earlier Baxter issues that I had purchased. So fun stuff. So that's what we mean by Baxter. I did want to just quick mention because I got this in an email and Eric said that you had seen this as well. There is a new complete Legion of Superheroes animated DVD coming. Let's see, you can pre-order for a July 14th release. So Warner Archive, they are finally bringing the 2 seasons, only about 20 some episodes of Legion of Superheroes, the animated series. The first season has a young Superboy. The second season has a Superboy from the Legion's future, which is always interesting. I think it's from like the 41st century or 41st century. Yeah. So if anybody has seen the Legion animated series, or if you haven't seen the Legion animated series and you're still into buying physical, you'll be able to buy the complete season.
And Peter, I think I also saw today that they're offering it. You said DVD, but they're offering a Blu-ray version as well.
Mm.
And this is great because I am one of those people that likes the physical stuff, much to my wife's chagrin, because I will not get rid of all of my CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays of things that I love. And even though, okay, even though if you are a subscriber to the DC Universe app, you can watch all those episodes. And I haven't seen the entire run of that show, but pretty close. I have obviously bought these before DC Universe. The DC Universe app was even around, but I bought the first season set. They're like 3 discs for the first season, and you cannot get, as far as I understand, you cannot get the second season on any disc until this complete series thing was announced. So this is awesome. Now I can actually compromise with my wife and say, okay, I'm going to get rid of these discs, but I'm going to get this other one.
So this series ran from 2006 to 2008. There's a couple featurettes that they have on it. If I keep reading the email, I'm realizing it does look like the 2 DVDs are separate. There's season 1, and then you can order the complete second season as well.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know the differences, but just to say that there's a new version of this material, or finally it's all getting collected. There you go.
Yeah, that's good.
Lastly, before we get into the actual issue, which I think Eric and I are both really excited about this issue and this episode today. So I want to give a little bit of a shout out to Daryl Taylor of the Taylor Network of Podcasts. One of the hosts of DC All-Stars that I'm sometimes on, because he is a fan of what we're doing here. He's a listener, I should say. I don't like to use the word fan. He's a listener of what we're doing here. And every time we record a DC All-Stars, he says, when's the next Legion project? When's the next Legion project? I'm reading these issues. I want you to do another Legion project. So I'll dedicate this episode to him today.
Yeah, I always get a kick out of that whenever I'm listening to one of his shows, and he's badgering you for the new episode. I love it.
It's cool. It's nice to know people are digging what we're doing. And,
yeah.
So and this is going to be, I hope, a good episode. If this is your first episode of the Legion Project, because as I said, I think we are going to have a good episode because this was a great issue.
It is. It is probably my favorite issue. I mean, I have a bad memory, so we already talked about 22 issues previously, and there have been some really good issues in there. I just know there were, but maybe it's just because this issue's right front and center, right in front of my face for the last 2 weeks. But oh my God, this was so much fun to read.
And I think it was so much fun to read because we've been in, so this whole second year of the series, if you go from like issue 13 to 24 or whatever, has been good. But then in the past 5 or 6 issues, we've been sort of up and down.
That's true.
And I feel like this harkens back to the first 3 or 4 or 5 issues that Steve Lytle took over. It's like he never missed a beat.
Yes.
The collaboration, the sequential art of it all, the marriage between words and pictures and letters and colors. And it's a damn fun. I'm totally jumping the gun. We're doing our thoughts and we haven't even done the synopsis yet, but it's so good.
Yes.
It's really good.
Uh-huh.
So, okay. So let's go official. Let's go. Here we go. Let's talk about Legion of Superheroes issue 23. Our format is going to be all over the place.
That's all right.
Hit us with the synopsis and the credits.
All right. Issue number 23, Back Home in Hell. Written by Paul Levitz, the lovely and wonderful Steve Lytle, guest penciler and co-plotter. Greg LaRocque doing a penciling assist. Mike DiCarlo is the inker, John Costanza letterer, Carl Gafford colorist, Karen Berger editor, with a cover by Steve Lytle. So what happens in this issue? There's a lot. I couldn't believe how much I was writing for the synopsis, Peter. Anyway, The issue opens with many Legionnaires reacting to Mon-El screaming. Shadowlass enters Brainiac 5's lab to witness Mon-El destroying lab equipment while Brainy sadly watches from inside his force field. As others arrive, Brainiac 5 tells them that Mon-El's increasing resistance to his lead poisoning has reached a breaking point. He's dying. Shadowlass calls for a Phantom Zone projector, but Mon-El recoils at the suggestion, declaring he'd rather die than spend, quote, another lifetime there. He then flies away. Dawnstar quickly follows, expressing what everyone is thinking. They want to help. Mon-El rejects the overture, but when he tries to fly through the Earth's polymer screen, he bounces off of it. He is just too weak. On Rimbor, Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass are looking for information about the Persuader and an associate named Javers. Back at the Legion HQ, Sunboy oversees repairs, and we see things from Mon-El's perspective within the Phantom Zone. Brainiac 5 has set up a means of communication and promises Mon-El that they will get him out. But Mon-El responds, "You shouldn't have sent me here. I don't want to live if I'm only a phantom." He then leaves, with Brainy speculating he's left Earth, the area in which Earth resides intersecting with the Phantom Zone. At the Time Institute, Cosmic Boy and Night Girl are leaving on a vacation to the 20th century. Just as they leave, the Legionnaires burst in, demanding a time bubble. As Element Lad tells the Chronarch, our only way to save Mon-El from an eternity in limbo is with Superboy's help. Phantom Girl and Tellus enter the Phantom Zone in an attempt to bring Mon-El back to Earth-adjacent space. And as Element Lad, Shadowlass, and Dawnstar travel through time, they notice the changed nature of the time stream. It's stormy, rough, and slower than before. Element Lad remarks, it's as though the very nature of time has changed. However, they do arrive in Superboy's time and they go off to find him. Back to Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass, they have left Rimbor, and Magnetic Kid, remember him, is giving them an update on Mon-El's situation. The scene ends with curious reactions on both the ladies' parts. In the 20th century, the Legionnaires find Superboy, and Shady tells him that they desperately need him. Back in the Phantom Zone, Phantom Girl and Tellus find Mon-El and kidnap him. With Superboy, the Legionnaires return to the 30th century, but encounter the same strange disturbances in the time stream. Element Lad notices that the effects are worse around Superboy's time, and they pop out briefly in the 21st century, and we see a time-hopped Jonah Hex for a few panels. See Jonah Hex number 10 per Karen. Superboy exits the bubble, and he delivers everyone to Brainy's lab. Mon-El has been returned to the lab and pulled out of the Phantom Zone. Brainiac 5's solution? Injecting Superboy's kryptonite-irradiated blood cells into Mon-El. The story ends some days later with Shady and Mon-El out for a walk. She's happy he's alive and on the mend, but Mon-El is still thinking about his time in the zone. Finally, they spy Sensor Girl nearby, and Mon-El tells Shady that while he was in the zone, he felt as though he were hallucinating, and that she would not believe him if he told her what he thought he saw. Whew. Man, this wasn't a page count increase, was it? I don't think so, but sure seemed like there was a lot going on in this issue.
Well, remember, new format, right? No ads or very little ads. Backup
and
tail.
No backups. That's right.
Right.
Is this the first issue where we didn't have a backup? I've already forgotten the last issue.
I don't remember either. No, I think last issue was a full issue too. I can't remember. That was 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, that's true. One issue, but 2 episodes for us.
Right. Yeah. Go listen to the Tales of the Legion Project episode we put out, because that's on Legionnaires 3, the miniseries. Mm-hmm. And that's it doesn't necessarily take place between issues 22 and 23, but that's where we put it because that's where it wraps up. And I'm sure we will reference it a tiny bit, maybe, for one of the scenes in this issue. So you don't necessarily have to listen to it before this issue because it doesn't connect, but that's what we mean by two episodes ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So any other general thoughts that you want to gush about?
Well, okay. So this, like I said, last episode, we are getting into a run of issues in this book that I have never read. And so this was another one of those issues. I obviously have had this in my collection for a long time. I may have thumbed through it, but as I was reading through this, I really didn't recognize anything. So I doubt even I did that. So this was a totally new experience for me. And it was such a breath of fresh air.
That's great.
And like you said, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that Steve Lytle is back, and we can talk about that in more detail. But and just the whole Mon-El stuff, and as people could hear in the synopsis, which is usual for the Legion book, there's constant A story, and then there's a B story, and sometimes there's a C story, and things go back and forth because Paul Levitz likes to break up things like that. Or I should say Levitz and whomever his artist is likes to do that. But it was, my God, the Mon-El story was the highlight of this issue for sure. And there was so much that they threw in here, and there was so much that they even could have done. They could have gone even further if they hadn't wasted pages on a B or a C plot. So anyway, that's kind of my overall general thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, it really is a fine issue. I mean, not even in terms of what's going on inside the content, but I feel like even the issue as craftsmanship, like even though it has two different artists, Steve Lytle and Greg LaRocque, Mike DiCarlo does a fairly decent job at having some consistency. You can see as the issue goes on, some of the Steve Lytle stuff gets a little less, but that still didn't take away my enjoyment. There's something about the format. Lytle is so good at the page turn. There's some really enjoyable page turn moments, and I don't know. There's something about the juggling of all the different stories that I appreciated as well, even though you can kind of tell that some of the stuff feels like it was either an afterthought, or I don't know how early they worked on this issue, or if this is something that whatever the genesis of the idea of the story was between Levitz and Lytle, maybe it had to grow a little bit because of where it fell, since Lytle hasn't been on the book for a while. I think you're right. I think it is one of my favorite issues of the 23 that we've read so far, plus the annuals. It's an end. What's nice is it wraps up a plot line. Mm-hmm. Yay! We can scratch one off the list.
Wait, are you saying that this doesn't come back ever again?
No, I don't think so. No, I hope not. And not only is it a Mon-El story, because it is Steve Lytle, it is also a part Tellus story, a little bit, you can tell that's obviously one of his babies, one of his creations, one of his favorites. So, good stuff. Good stuff. So, let's dig in. Let's go to the cover. What do you think?
Well, this is just like the issue. This is one of my favorite covers now because, or the Baxter issue. On the surface, there's just so much going on here, but it features all the prominent characters in the issue, and just the representation of what Mon-El must be feeling, must be thinking about this situation is just wonderfully done here. I love this cover.
Yeah, the abstract nature of him breaking out of his tormented face, right? Like, you can consider that the Phantom Zone trap, and his memories of being in the Phantom Zone, and that nightmarish look in the face. So he's breaking out of that because of his rage, and all those wooden tendrils or limbs are reaching out to the other Legionnaires because they're affected by it too. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Shadowlash, she's front and center with him, but the rest of the Legion too. Everything that he's going through, they are being affected as well. So it's a striking cover. It really is pretty great. What do you think of the Tales cover? So Tales 348. This is pencils by Ron Frenz with inks by Dick Giordano, colors by Anthony Tollin. And it is another. It's a little bit more of a scene from the actual issue.
Yeah.
A lot of purple, a lot of white. It's basically Mon-El, Tellus, and Phantom Girl in the Phantom Zone. So what do you think of that cover?
Well, it's a pardon me, a pale comparison to the Baxter issue. So, I mean, yeah, it's fine if for depicting that scene. But beyond that, it's no competition for me whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. I do like the colors.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the colors on it, and I think we'll talk about it more when we get into the actual issue because it's highly reflective. One thing that I'm glad that Ron Frenz obviously did his homework and looked at the issue and said, "Oh, I like that. I'm gonna do that." You know, whereas we've seen some other covers that are kind of like way left of center when it comes to what's going on in the book. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, I'm the same way. 23's cover, great. Great.
Well, you mentioned purple because that pops in my head because when we did the Legionnaires 3 discussion, you talked about the purple on the covers of that series too. So I'm sensing a pattern here, Peter.
I love purple. Favorite color. A couple things on the cover of issue 23. The detail, Mon-El's Legion ring. Look how prominent it is. That's detail. Also, Shadowlass's her armbands are, you can see the little S symbol on them when a lot of artists just sort of gloss over the detail of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if people don't recognize the one arm by Dawnstar, that is Superboy.
Yeah.
You just see the blue costume, but you don't actually see like a symbol or anything.
Yeah, and I have thoughts about that. So, I'll mention that later.
Okay. Okay. So I suggest we go page by page.
Okay.
We haven't done that in a while. But that's how my notes are. Unless you have something like general you want to quick talk about getting into the issue, but I kind of want to go page by page.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with me. That's generally how I do my notes anyway.
Okay, so page one. This, like I said, this is rare. I think we did this in the early episodes, but we sort of we always change our format, so that's fine. I think it's a great first page. It uses the 9-panel grid really well. I'm even going to go so far as to say I legit want every comic to have this. I don't like Marvel's previously page. I know some people do, where they're like, oh, previously, blah, 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 words. And sometimes they even put information in a previously page that didn't actually happen in the first. They sort of extrapolate information, or you're going to find it out in the issue that you're actually reading. But when it comes to like a scorecard for the Legion and for all of their reactions to what's going on with Mon-El, this is a great opening page.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works so well for the story, and it works so well for the Legion itself. Just some great stuff there, and little tidbits, right? We got like Invisible Kid in Interlac, the Lord is my shepherd poster, which speaks volumes to, the kind of character that he is. Where Element Lad is in the mission monitor room because he's the leader. That's where it is. That's where he lives. That's where he should be, right? You got Tellus in his atmospheric conditioned room, which is a room they talked about way long time ago, like in issue 304 of the Legion, which is where Steve Lido got his inspiration to do the character, because I think it was a conversation between Nightwind and Lamprey or something like that at the Legion Academy, and they're like, oh, our friend who has the room that has to have a specific atmospheric conditions. So Lido took that and went, all right, I'm going to create a character that kind of room needs, and here we are actually seeing it because he's not wearing the helmet. Just a great first page. Great.
Well, and you have I love I guess the buttons on this page, which you start off with Shadowlass, who is Mon-El's lover and probably the closest person to him in the Legion. And it ends with a great page turn, as you mentioned earlier, with Brainiac 5 saying, "I'm so sorry," to get you to turn that page. But, aside from Shadowlass, at least in this story, he's probably the closest person, per se, to Mon-El right now, because he's so involved in trying to help him and correct this situation with the lead serum that's not working anymore. So that was a great juxtaposition of those two characters and the way that they're framed on this page.
As we go through a lot of these issues from previous episodes and of course the episodes coming up with this whole who is Sensor Girl mystery, I don't know how teenage me could have read this, looked at that panel, and not figure out who the hell Sensor Girl is without saying it, Because Sensor Girl's in the Hall of the Dead Legionnaires. And we have a whole bunch of characters there.
Well, wait. You mean she's not Chemical King's girlfriend?
She's not Chemical King's girlfriend, no.
Well, and that's a great little panel too. It's wonderfully done. It's silent because everybody else on this 9-panel grid page is saying something. There is sound there, or there's motion or movement or whatnot. And this panel with Sensor Girl, it's quiet. No one's talking. No one's saying anything. She's just there in the Hall of Dead Heroes. Which is a great foreshadow for what we find out next.
But what is she doing, though? She is listening. Like, I'm extrapolating
you're right. Mm-hmm.
what she was doing before Mon-El goes bonkers, right? Where would she be looking? I don't want to say it, because then it'll give it away. So if you read this issue and you know who Sensor Girl is, fine. If you don't know who it is, this is like Levitz's last clue of like, come on, you dummies, if you haven't figured it out now. Which I didn't, because truthfully, the person she turns out to be, I had not read a lot of Legion stories with that person. So, but when I read it this time, I went, oh my God, there it is, front and center.
Mm-hmm.
So great first page. Great status quo. Love it. Page 2, we get Mon-El in fury. That we get the destruction of the headquarters, and we get Brainy's lab. Now, what I love about this is the attention to detail that Lytle has given to the placement of where Brainy's lab is. So in that third panel, you're looking from outside of the Legion headquarters, right? And it's the destruction is happening along one of the arms. As you're looking at the headquarters, it's your right side, right? If you go all the way back to Tales 320, the issue with the Magpie, where they actually had like a map of the Legion of headquarters, that is where Brainy's lab is. And I have to assume the Who's Who also had it, right? It had that map of the Legion headquarters. Brainy's lab is kind of at the bottom of that arm of the headquarters, and that's exactly where the destruction is. So great consistency there.
Mm-hmm. And you got the more artistic flair. You got the second and fourth panels here at the top of the page. These kind of thin borders to denote those areas being shaken from the destruction, the rage destruction that Mon-El's imparting on the HQ. I thought that was just a nice little touch.
Yeah, it's comics, right? You can have the panels tell their own story.
Yeah,
just by how you're shaping it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lytle is so good at that.
Yeah. Look at page 3. I'll just jump to page 3 if you want to backtrack, you can. Like that second panel of Mon-El saying, the serum isn't working. Look at the background, like all that black mark.
Yeah, that is so good. It's so simple and yet so effective. It's almost like like the Phantom Zone's already reaching out to grab him and pull him in. God, I love it.
Yeah, just the despair too.
Yeah.
This issue is highly emotional. I'll even say it's dramatic in a lot of places. But I think that's why it works, because first of all, it's a showcase for Mon-El's pain, but it keeps that whole soap opera aspect of the Legion going. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love it. It's one of the reasons why I love the X-Men, not because they battled the Juggernaut or Magneto, but because they used to stand around and debate, and they used to argue, and they used to fight each other. There was these moments of just pure passion, and there's a lot of that going on. And I think this page is really good for that too. I mean, you have Brainy just sort of watching it. You have Computer who's shaking. You have Mon-El going nuts, and then all the Legionnaires start running in, and Brainy says he's dying in their face, and it's just sort of shocked, and then more Legionnaires running in, and then when you get the page turn, you get Shady like going, "You dummies, do something! Don't just stand there!" Like, just it's good, such good storytelling.
So speaking of Shady, back on page 2, when she runs into the lab. Again, like I said, on that first page, you had it starts with Shady, it ends with Brainy, and with Mon-El in the middle, and you have that same construction here from a different perspective or angle, which I thought was awesome, and just the way that she runs into, speaking of the drama, the previous panel of that, she's like, "Mon-El, stop! You're destroying the building," and she runs in, and she's like, "Please," and you could just hear the fear and despair in her voice, just from the way that this was lettered.
I used to always think that Shady I think that she's usually portrayed as being cold, not royalty, but just sort of like with an air about her. And I know some later reboot versions, they try to make her a little harsher than maybe she should be, but I do feel like she has an ownership of herself, but not when it comes to Mon-El. Like, no. I feel like, he's the most powerful humanoid in the Legion, and he's decaying and going nuts. So I like that Levitz he's like, okay, I'm going to show that she's, right there. She's crying. She's trying to calm him down. But then the next thing she does is action. We got to do something. And I think even throughout some of the other scenes that we see her, although she doesn't have a lot to do, which I wanted a little bit more from her character than just the girlfriend. I do like that she does have a sense of urgency about her, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, she is the champion of Telok. Oh gosh, it was a 7 or 8. I always forget.
Right.
So that makes sense to me. She obviously she has very strong feelings for Mon-El, but she is an action hero to some degree. I wish they would play that up more, I guess. She always comes across as more kind of, she comes across as Mon-El's girlfriend far too much in the Legion stories, and she should be more of a leader. I think take on more of a leadership role based on her past and her experience.
Has she ever been leader? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Page 4, another great page. I'm a fan of like how all of the panels start to get really tight. I think the first panel could be a cover on its own. The way everybody's looking onto her, like that's a great image.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we get the introduction of the Phantom Zone projector to possibly aid Mon-El, and he is not having it.
Yeah, and that I guess technically it's the third panel on this page, but things are kind of blending into panels are blending into each other, especially at the bottom there. I was going to mention that, but in that third panel, he's yelling no at that suggestion, and he has a crazed look on his face when he's screaming that. And I Lytle and DiCarlo did a fantastic job depicting that, because it's a bit manic too, because it goes from this extreme fear and anger and despair and whatever else he's going through to in the bottom left of this page, that the look on his face is just, his eyes are kind of sunken in, and the way that his expression is, he's given into despair, and it's just incredibly sad.
Now, did you see what Timberwolf says when she's like, "All right, go get the Phantom Zone projector," and Timberwolf's, "Well, I guess I'm the fastest." So really? Is he? I mean, I guess like Dawnstar's in the room. She's not faster than Timberwolf? Maybe because they're inside the building?
Yeah. And it's just such an oddball thing. He's kind of an ass. Even in this difficult situation, Timberwolf still comes across as an ass.
Page 5, we get a little bit more of that continuation of Mon-El's state of mind, as you said, where he gets sort of real contemplative almost, the decision between death or the zone, and he's like, okay, then I'm going to choose death because I've been through 1,000 years in the zone. You have not. And this is a discussion, debate topic that he's going to have throughout the issue. We're just sort of starting to see it here. Another great page. I love Mon-El's, love the way Lytle draws Mon-El in that first panel. The coloring is great. And just the fact that he can't break Earth's polymer shield because he's weakened, and he bounces off of it, which, boy, I would love to see that like on a live action or animated version, because that's such a great Legion thing, right? He's trying to break the polymer shield and boom. Which makes me always wonder, like, how do they get through the polymer shield? Like, does it have 1 billion openings all over the planet? Is there only a few specific locations? Do they just sort of zip through it? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned colors there. I noticed, that first long panel where he's flying away and Dawnstar's chasing him, we get some clouds and they're all kind of different colors, which, if it's evening or twilight or whatever, that could be a nice depiction of that. But then as we go across the page to the right, the clouds turn dark, which reflecting his state of mind, perhaps. Just little picking up on little bits that I didn't really notice before that really reflect the emotional state that's being shown here. So again, wonderful.
Do you want me to keep going? Do you want to take over for the next couple pages or so?
This is fine. But it's curious because this part of the book, the Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass C-plot, it was my least favorite of what's going on in this issue. But it's still good to go through because artistically there's lots of things to really, I guess, focus on and enjoy. So, as I said in the synopsis, they're there to question some probably not so great folks at this bar, and to find out information about Persuader and who he's meeting with. And really the thing that I loved about this, a couple things. One is there's so much stuff going on here. So many characters. So Lytle has just gone to town with all these aliens, and the ambiance of this establishment. I loved it. Got some guest stars in the background in this particular panel with Spider-Man and Fred Flintstone. There's probably others. There's a few other characters that I kind of went, that looks familiar to me, but I couldn't quite place who they were. But I love those little kind of Easter eggs that we've gotten that before too. In previous issues. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I thought the guy at the bar, the hooded guy with the skull on his belt, I was like, is that like a Legion villain? Is that going to be somebody? He's sort of too prominent to kind of just be, but I couldn't figure it out.
I thought so too. Oh boy. Jim Starlin, he did a book, Dreadstar. That's what I'm thinking of. It kind of reminded me of Dreadstar for some reason. But it's obviously not colored the right way or whatnot. But anyway, but it could be just an homage to that.
There's also the guy in the second panel smoking a cigar. that
yes, that was
feels
one of the
like
others.
What's that?
Yeah, that was one of the other ones where I was like, that seems really familiar.
Almost like he's a Kirby character.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Say, what else about this particular scene did you find interesting or?
Well, most of it, I what I kind of like is that they're following up on the Fatal Five stuff that happened either last issue or a couple issues back, where the Emerald Empress is like, I'm starting a new Fatal Five, you know. So I kind of like that, and it's going to continue into the next couple issues. So,
well, and on that, isn't it? Did you find it curious that these two Legionnaires were pursuing these or pursuing the Persuader in this way? I don't remember them being an integral part of, I guess, that. I was trying to remember from the previous issue or two how much they were. I mean, Lightning Lass was involved in the fight, but you know, why them? Why isn't Chameleon Boy doing this? You know, as the espionage squad leader. I mean, Shrieking Violet is part of that, but sure. Right.
I think it's what you said. Lightning Lass kind of led that mission of transporting the villains, and that's where Emerald Empress came in and all that stuff, and you know, went up against Sensor Girl, and then Shrinking Violet complimented her. I think it's a couple of things. I don't think it would be an espionage thing because they're fully out in the open, right? Like,
sure,
it's not a secret. They're trying to use their status, especially Shrinking Violet.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I think it's a number of things. Okay, so it moves that plot along, which is like I said, we're gonna come up with in the next couple of issues. So from a writer standpoint, great. Secondly, remember that interview where Levitz was like, you know, if you thought Shrinking Violet and Lightning Lass were a couple, that, you know, I don't think you know, like, remember he sort of sidestepped that question. Bullshit. He knows what he's talking. Excuse me, I swore. This is probably the first time on the podcast, right? On this podcast, anyway. I think he knew, and I think even if it wasn't going to that level, it's great because he's kind of making Shrinking Violet a mentor to Lightning Lass to sort of say, look, like the way she goes up to that bartender and flashes her, look at this ring, guy. I'm a Legionnaire. You better talk to me. You know, like, I love the panel on page 6, the last panel, where she actually pulls the bartender. Look how tiny she looks. She looks so tiny in that. You know, she's Shrinking Violet. She's probably not a tall woman, right? I like, because Ayla even says, you know, like, is this the first words that Shrinking Violet says? Are you ready? And she's like, do we have a choice? You know, like, I feel like this is the way Shrinking Violet's like trying to get Lightning Lass to own who she is, not only as a person, but as a Legionnaire, which has been a thing that Lightning Lass has been dealing with, right? Like, she's like, yeah, I want to be a Legionnaire. Well, look, this is what you can do. So I dug it for that reason, and I think the choice of the characters makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I only brought that up as a kind of a weird sidestep thing, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you. The interaction between these two characters continues with this scene that, as we've seen in previous issues, and boy, the relationship there is really starting to evolve. And I don't mean necessarily romantically, because it's only barely hinted at, I think, but just these two people interacting with each other, and the dynamic between them, like you said, even though Lightning Lass was involved with the whole Emerald Empress thing from previous issues, she is definitely the follower in the situation. She is, I think she's barely keeping up with Shrinking Violet in this. So I find that very curious. And I'm curious what that will mean for future scenes, future interactions with these characters.
Yeah, this is an arc. This has really been an arc for Ayla. I mean, from way back in the first 6 issues, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where she freely admits that she was in the Legion to be with Timberwolf once they got together, right? And I think we talked about it in episode 6, where You know, she was in the Legion because of her brother, and then she was in the Legion because of Timberwolf, and she was never in the Legion for herself, and now she's in it for herself. And she says it there, right, at the second to last panel on 7. This was a lot of work for nothing. Couldn't the SPs have find that much out themselves? And then, you know, Shrinkify, like, look, this is the way we can do. This is how we can do our work. So it's great, and I think it's just a great continuation of their friendship and a building of that. The other two things about these two issues, the sign behind the bartender, "We don't serve proteins." You know, there's that future racism going about, right? A little bit of a subplot with the proteins, always keeping that going. And then the caption that introduces this scene from the United Planets Tourist Directory about Rimbor, a rough world settled by colonists only 3 generations ago. And I looked up, a generation is only about 30 years, roughly. So are they saying that Rimbor is only about 90 years old? That kind of felt a little odd to me, but...
Yeah, that was new to me.
Yeah. I mean, I looked up what a generation is, and they said it's usually roughly about 30 years, right? Unless maybe in the future it's more. Maybe a generation's like 60 years, you know, because people live longer or whatever, have kids at a later age. So maybe it might be even longer because it is 1,000 years in the future. But that was odd to me, that, you know, especially being Ultra Boy's home planet.
Yeah. So that means probably his parents moved there for work, and, you know, he was really only there for a short time period before he went off to join the Legion, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know my Rimborian history, but it's kind of cool because if it is a relatively new colony, a new planet, it kind of speaks to, you know, the kind of hold that fell onto it early, instead of sort of being like, oh, you know, this is a pleasant place. And, you know, like when Star Trek goes to a new colony, it's like, oh, look at everything you've done here. No, it's like Vice has really just settled on this planet right away. It's like, we're gonna be a darker planet, and
it's like the old west towns,
yeah,
from in America, where things would spring up because of a gold rush or something, and then all of the Vice stuff would quickly follow.
That's a perfect analogy, because what are they doing? They're walking into a bar. That's the beginning of every great Wild West thing. That's perfect. That's perfect.
I did find it curious, the way that Violet's looking in that last panel on, I forget what page number we're on now, but of that 2-page scene. She is getting a certain amount of delight out of this idea, or her desire, or knowledge that as a Legionnaire, she has a certain cachet, a certain amount of clout that even the science police officers don't. And it's almost kind of creepy that she's into it so much. I don't know. But I can see a through line there in the way that, you know, what happened with her in the other Legion book that we found out around the early 300s, I forget, where she had been kidnapped and someone had replaced her in the Legion. And then when she got out, she totally different personality. So I see this as kind of a progression of that characterization that we've been getting of Shrinking Violet.
Right. I wrote in my notes, big D energy, if you know what D stands for. All right, let's keep moving. So,
yes.
What are your notes for the next sequence? It's about 3 pages, 8, 9, and 10.
For page 8, oh my God, I just from a storytelling standpoint, this was just beautiful. What is that? 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 panels on this page, and yet none of it's wasted. You get Sunboy overseeing repairs, as I said in the synopsis, but then, oh my God, then you get this wonderful think of it as like a camera moving through a scene, and it starts off with a long shot and gets closer and closer, and then transitions to Shadowless sitting by herself on a bed, it looks like, and then it quickly, halfway through the page, quickly turns, and we are seeing things we now know from Mon-El's perspective from the Phantom Zone, and we follow him through the Legion headquarters as he gets closer to Brainy's lab. And I just adore this storytelling on this page.
This is what I meant about like sort of the craftsmanship. Like,
yes,
especially as he's going through the hallway there, it keeps moving from one side to the other a lot of times because he's a phantom, right? So he's sort of floating through. Yeah,
exactly.
And just to see Shady reflected in his eye in a reverse image, and just beautiful.
Yeah, God. And then I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about the page. Oh, I forget where we're at now. Page 9. Why don't they put numbers on these things? That bottom half is really the thing that I adore about this next page. Just seeing images of things that Mon-El has witnessed or experienced from his time in the Phantom Zone. We get the classic what do I want to say here? Reproduction of or I should say a reproduction of the classic scene from when Superboy put Mon-El into the Phantom Zone. And that was, I went and looked at my Legion Omnibus, Peter. Here, I have a little bit of history here I want to throw in if you don't mind. So Mon-El first appeared in Superboy issue 89. This was in June of 1961. And he was thought to be, in case people don't know, Mon-El was at first thought to be an older brother of Superboy. At least that's what Superboy supposed. And because he could do all these wonderful things, and he had this necklace with an inscription from, I believe it was Lara. And Lara Jor-El, right? Because the women use the men's full name, right?
I think so, yeah.
I think, yeah, weird society. Anyway, so just kind of a weird thing, and it turns out that he's actually not Superboy's older brother. He's actually a Daxamite who had traveled to Krypton right before it exploded, and so Jor-El and Lara helped him, I guess basically helped him, shoot him off the planet before it exploded. And then he was kind of trapped in stasis or limbo or whatever until his spaceship arrived on Earth years later and met Superboy. Anyway, he has the lead, or much like kryptonite affects Superboy, lead apparently affects Daxamites. And so Superboy's solution was to send him into the Phantom Zone. So there's that. There you go. History's over. History lesson is over. But he also, through the various appearances of Mon-El in the Phantom Zone, that's also the repository, the prison for the greatest criminals that Krypton had. And so after Krypton's destruction, those same Phantom Zone criminals were still in the Phantom Zone and then tormented Mon-El for years. I hesitate to say centuries, but I don't know. And there's a little image of Superman here, supposedly maybe researching ways to cure Mon-El of his affliction, I suppose. And then we get the images to the right, which is Darkseid lording over some naked people. I assume those are, I don't know. Daxamites? Are these Daxamites? Are these other people? But I guess the point is that showing Mon-El, because he's got tears in his eyes, and he's just affected so much by things he cannot intercede in. And I just thought that was a great, depicting that despair. It also shows Mon-El really wants to help people, and I really like that particular image there.
it really is, as you said, it's a history lesson of Mon-El, told in a very subtle kind of way. The way that Brainy and Element Lad are talking to him through that view screen, it was a way that they used to always talk to him back in the day. I mean, I went back and because I had read the Mon-El first appearance story at some point, I don't know when, but then I was kind of like flipping through and trying to see his later stories when he was just a phantom before he would actually join the Legion. And it was always the same way. He was either in a view screen or he was a phantom, and he would only show up like maybe for a page or two. And then the Phantom Zone villains would usually mock him. And he all kind of took it in stride, right? Like every time he was just a phantom, and then Superboy would say, oh, I'll find a cure. And then later stories when he's Superman, he's like, okay, I'm going to find a cure. And it's like, if I was Mon-El, I'd be like, all right, can you get on that? You're kind of like not really trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I like it for all those reasons. You really get a sense of Mon-El's history. And what I kind of liked is we've been told a lot about that, but we haven't ever seen it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen what Mon-El's life was like after the age of Superman and the Justice League. Like if we would sort of extrapolate the future of the DC history, we haven't really seen it unless I'm missing a story that I haven't read. So I kind of like that we get a sense of that here. And of course, after all of this, a lot of that history changes. But just the notion that was his existence for his first year of comic book appearances. It was just him as a phantom showing up every now and then in these wacky stories until they finally brought him out for a cure, and then there was a second story where they came up with a more reasonable cure, and then he joins the Legion.
Right,
So,
and just for specifics, what you're talking about is when they had sort of a cure was Adventure Comics 300, and Saturn Girl had created that temporary serum that allowed him to be out of the zone for, I think they said, 10 minutes at a time or something like that. So it would have been interesting to see Saturn Girl be a part of the story, this particular issue, too, because of that. Could you imagine being trapped, for 1,000 years in this zone and then only being allowed 10 minutes of freedom at a time for, I don't know how much time had to pass in between. But that would, I think, drive me more crazy than not being able to get out of the zone at all.
Yeah.
And then in Adventure Comics, and just 5 issues later, Adventure Comics 305, that's when we find out that Brainiac 5 had perfected that serum, and Mon-El was able to come out permanently from the zone, and then has this weird, Mon-El, you've been trapped in the Phantom Zone for 1,000 years. What do you want to do next? Oh, I want to have some fun and apply for Legion membership, pretending to be somebody else. Let's do it.
All that Silver Age wackiness.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just under 2 years from his first appearance in Superboy '89 to when he actually gets out for good in Adventure Comics 305.
Wow.
So I had thought it had been a longer time period than that. But that was interesting to see.
Just a quick reference to the Tales of the Legion of Superheroes 348 that reprints this issue, because I have a copy of it. That Darkseid scenario, they ink in the gentleman's butt crack. So you can't actually see it. So I guess for the newsstand edition, they don't do anything to the girl, but they cover the butt up a little bit. Sort of interesting. Also, little sidebar. So that Superboy story that you were talking about, the first appearance of Mon-El, called Superboy's Big Brother. Do you know that it was inspired by a 1953 story from Superman 80?
Oh, yeah.
By Edmund Hamilton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Al Plastino. Yeah, it was called Superman's Big Brother. And the story kind of falls the same way. It's a guy in a pink and purple costume that comes to the Earth the same way, and Superman makes the same leap of logic, just like Superboy did in that original story. He's like, oh, you must be my big brother. And then he's saying things like, well, I can't outshine him, or he might feel bad that his little brother, is more powerful than him. It's so strange. But that character's name was Hawk Carr, Halkkar. And it's from Superman 80. It has a lot of the same beats. It ends the same way, where he gets his memory back and realizes, no, I was just another guy. Like, this one obviously has a little more connection because of Daxam, and has a little more longevity. But yeah, so the Mon-El story, without that Superman story, we would not have got a Mon-El story. And in one of the notes in one of the DC wikis that I saw, there's some people who consider Halk Carr from the Superman 80 as the Mon-El of Earth 2.
I saw that too. Yeah, that was interesting.
So a little bit of a fun Legion stuff. I never knew that. Never knew it. So that's cool. What do you have for page 10, the next page?
Mostly, I just like the way it's almost cinematic in a way. Mon-El's like, I won't wait another 1,000 years. I'm going to die. And as the next two panels progress, the word die gets well, I guess not. It gets bigger than the first panel, but it's just like he's getting larger and expanding beyond the area. I don't know if that's supposed to be taken literally or just figuratively, but it's either way. It's a wonderful depiction of this really dramatic moment that Mon-El is having.
Yeah, I took it as kind of both, because he does reference that later where he says, "Well, I'll just spread my atoms out."
Yeah, if he can, he wants to try that. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to page 11 and 12. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this is where I said, if you've read the Legionnaires 3 miniseries, this is it's not a continuation. In fact, they never mention it, which is sort of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a little bit of a strike against Levitt's writing, but I will say maybe it probably has to do with maybe they just didn't know when the miniseries was going to be shipped and didn't know where it was going to fall. I don't know. So I'm a little disappointed that it didn't reference that, but it's Cosmic Boy and Night Girl, and they have come to the Time Institute to get a time bubble to go back to the 20th century, and
for a peaceful vacation.
Peaceful vacation. Well, that's not going to happen. And then immediately on the heels, we get Shadow, Lass, Element Lad, and Dawnstar, who they also need a time bubble because they have come up with a solution to go back to Superboy's time. Now, Cosmic Boy, they're going back to the 20th century of Superman's time, and the other three are going back to Superboy's time. And we get 2 pages here that I just have a ton of notes on. So do you want to start? Do you want me to start? What do you want?
Well, how about I start, because I don't have much to say about this.
Okay.
So if you got lots of things to go over, I found it very curious, because we just read Legionnaires 3, right? And exactly what you just said, there's not a lot of continuity between that miniseries and this scene, because the way that the Chronarch just lets all these Legionnaires take 2 time bubbles, one successively after the other, is like, that's not what we just read in Legionnaires 3. But I love, back to the art, I love the way that they depict the first time bubble when Cosmic Boy and Night Girl leave. I love the way that is shown, with the white bubble with that bluish green energy surrounding it, with the red elliptical strands coming around. I just thought that was really cool. It's so simple yet really effective. And then there was something the Chronarch says. Oh yeah, I wonder if it is wise to tempt fate so. Ah well, we shall see. And is that some sort of weird a time professor comment, or it was really bizarre to me. I thought, well, does he know something that we don't know yet? So it was kind of intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, it's an obvious setup for the Cosmic Boy miniseries, which we're going to get later. So that's it takes Cosmic Boy off the scorecard for a while. Let me just hit a couple of things here. So on this page 11, Cosmic Boy's look, his sort of just generic suit. He's not in a super suit or anything like that. However, that blue quality to it and the little circlets that are a Cosmic Boy thing. This is very reminiscent of Barry Kitson's look during the Wade and Kitson era.
Oh yeah, good point.
Like Cosmic Boy is usually always purple, pink, purple, black. Like those those sort of colors. But then we got to that Kitson design and it went blue, right? Which was so like, what, blue? But this I'm like, I wonder if he went back and was inspired by this, because I think it's very close. I have to laugh that Cosmic Boy also has one piece of luggage versus Night Girl's various pieces of luggage, right? A little bit of visual sexist jokes going on there.
Yeah.
So, and then on page 12, this is only really the only other note I have about these two pages, is about that same quote that the Chronarch has, because I think this and some of the later sequences, this is really the first time we're getting DC's point of view post-Crisis that time is not easy to go through anymore. When they wrapped up the Crisis, I can remember either reading in letter columns, I don't know if it was in All-Star Squadron with Roy Thomas, maybe it is here because of the Legion. I always got this notion that DC always wanted to put a little bit of a kibosh on all of this back and forth time travel stuff that Superman could do, that Flash could do. That's a lot of that time stuff is brought up in Crisis itself. So I think Chronarch saying that is kind of like almost like a mandate. Like this is the new DC universe. Even if we're in this kind of limbo world right now between the end of Crisis and the beginning of John Byrne's Man of Steel, they're starting to cement some of those facts that time should be difficult. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in another page as we get to it. So that was all my notes for those two pages.
Peter, did you go and translate all that interlac that's on that final panel?
I tried it. I couldn't really figure it out. It kind of was too jumpy and
yeah. I quite honestly, I appreciate that you do that because I've given up.
All right, so we seem to both be getting 5 pages, doing every 5 pages. So if we go to the next 3 pages on this sequence, this is like just beautiful. Like this is 13, 14, 15. This is the Legion putting Tellus into the Phantom Zone, with Phantom Girl chasing along after him because they want to get Mon-El. And I think it's a great use of the Tellus character. I don't know if I ever knew that. I guess I knew that that's what Phantom Girl could do, that she could zip into the Phantom Zone. And I think there's some smart decisions. Like not only have we seen Brainy, we've seen a lot of the Legionnaires in the background, but we see Dream Girl, which makes sense, right? Because as I've learned doing this podcast is the fact that she's supposedly the second smartest scientist, right, on the team. So it's great that Levitz is using her. It's totally in the background, so unless you know that, you don't know, but that's wonderful. And just artistic-wise, the Tellus splash page on 15, so beautiful. Like I said, this is one of Steve Lytle's creations, so for him to get a chance to be able to spotlight Tellus and also get some original artwork out of it, it's just fantastic. So.
Yeah. And on what was that 14, the previous page to that splash page, you get. I love it. I love when Lytle does this, and he does it quite a lot, but not so much that it's distracting or unnecessary, but just the different shapes of the panels to kind of convey the shifting nature of them going into the Phantom Zone or the Phantom Zone itself. I just love, again, using the medium here, the confines of the medium, the page, the panels in different ways. It's not, and this is a callback to our Legionnaires 3 discussion. It's playing around with stuff on the page. It's not just simple panel after simple panel after simple panel, like another artist may prefer. So, go listen to our Legionnaires 3 discussion for more on that. And we also get, this on this page too, we see Tellus removing his helmet, or his helmet's removed already. And he's actually putting it on in this panel, but we see him, for the second time in this issue without his helmet on, which is not something we normally see. So he's normally shown with that helmet. So I thought that was kind of neat, that we're seeing him, without assistive equipment that he needs in the normal Legion landscape. So that was really cool.
I also like this page 14 because it's Levitz giving a history lesson of the Phantom Zone, or at least a discussion of what it is, without it being too exposition-y, and some of the things that Phantom Girl is saying about, like, you can look out into the real world, don't let the Phantom Zone get you too confused. I love that Tellus is like, he basically compares it to the great mother ocean of his world, and he finds it wonderful. Like, this is what I mean about, like, this issue. Not only is there drama, but there's also passion and emotion. And, like, these 3 pages are so great because we're seeing the Phantom Zone through Tellus's eyes, and he thinks it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Which is like that. It's smart, right? Because Mon-El thinks it's a prison. He thinks it's wonderful. These are it's a story plot. It's a story that Lytle wanted to come up with. So I wonder did he make those connections? Did he want that comparison? Was that Levitz? It's great. So good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, do you mentioned this just a few minutes ago, but Phantom Girl just casually announces that she can do this. Have we ever seen her do that before? I have no recollection of her actually going into the Phantom Zone.
I think maybe we did. When I was doing all that time trapper stuff, and she was able to go between dimensions, and maybe it's Levitz and Lytle, and they said, well, this should be a wrinkle of her power because it kind of makes sense. Because that is what she's doing, right? Like when she's phasing, she is going between dimensions.
Right.
So if it is the first time, it definitely makes sense, and I think there is precedence as well.
Yeah, it's just the way that like I said, it seems very casual in the way that she presents the fact that she can do this. So it suggests, at the very least, that she has been able to do that before. So, but I mean, they could have just as easily said, "Well, I'll try," and then it works, and they move on, but.
But she's Phantom Girl. She's got it, man.
Yeah.
She's like the Donna Troy of the Legion. She just does.
And I love that. As much as I love Ultra Boy and I love those two characters together, I love it when Phantom Girl shows what she can do. And she did a little bit of that a few issues ago when they were dealing with that with Tyr's Planet and whatnot. So, any kind of spotlight here on. These other characters that don't always get the spotlight, and they're this sounds bad, but they're mostly shown as arm candy to the guys, and that's just wrong. And these kind of sequences really show the power and ability, and I don't mean superpowers, of these characters, especially the female characters. So more of that, please.
One of the things I'll throw in here from page 1 that I forgot to mention, because Tellus is Steve Lytle's baby, he wanted those little pods, those little circlets on Tellus's back to reflect emotionality based on colors, right? We talked about that in one of our previous episodes when Tellus first appeared. If you go back to page 1, all of those little circlets are white. And I looked up the old Steve Lytle design pages for Tellus when he broke down the different colors, and white means shock and awe and surprise. So
good.
Yeah. And the reason they don't do it with Tellus is because Lytle surmises that colorists probably thought it was just too much work to do. But I think it's fantastic.
Well,
so he only really gets a chance to use it once in this issue. So,
well, as he's entering the Phantom Zone, he has that glow, but because they're phantoms, it's white anyway. Right, instead of being another, I guess whatever the color is for happiness or joy or whatever.
Yeah,
to help depict that.
And when I think about the larger DC universe, I was thinking about like the Phantom Zone's role right now in this weird sort of crisis limbo. And if I did look through DC Comics Presents issue number 97, which is the last issue of DC Comics Presents, but that doesn't come out for another 3 months as we're reading these Legion issues, right? And it was billed as the last Phantom Zone story, but it's kind of like it's not really like a continuity issue. It's actually more of like whatever happened in the Man of Tomorrow. It's kind of like that. If you remember the Alan Moore stories, right before Byrne jumped onto the book, where it kind of put a little bit of like an ending to the Superman mythos. This is the same thing. And it was Steve Gerber and Rick Veitch, and I think that's who the creators were. Anyway, because I wanted to get a sense of like the Phantom Zone's journey, but because it's used much differently once Byrne gets into the book. But art-wise, the Phantom Zone it's different every now and then. But these pages are pretty beautiful, and there's some consistency to other stories. So. And obviously these pages are also what inspired the Tales reprint on 348 that we talked about earlier. All right, so let's go to 15, 16, and 17. You can take the lead on the next 5 pages.
So this is Element Lad, and Shadowlass, and Dawnstar traveling through time to get to Superboy's time. These 2 pages here where they're traveling through time, I just, this must have been the colorist's either nightmare or joyful experience. I don't know which, but
and we should say these pages are by Greg LaRocque now.
That correct. Yes, that's true. And so comparatively, I shouldn't say that. LaRocque does a fine job here. It's not what we've enjoyed thus far in terms of the artistic ability, but I will say, while this is just again more rectangular panels on a page, at least we have the color bands that to depict them traveling through time, and we have a bunch of these small panels on the first page of this sequence, much similar to the sequence that we saw earlier with Mon-El and the history lesson, just done in a much more checkerboard type fashion. But we get to see a bunch of different places and times. Dawnstar makes a comment, look, there are so many bits of our past visible. It is awesome. And Shadowlass. And here's actually really good way in which LaRocque is depicting Shadowlass with a really close or an extreme close up on part of her face, and she's just simply saying "scary." So that was a nice depiction, I guess.
I do wish those. This is the difference between Lytle and LaRocque, because I think Lytle might have actually picked some Legion history.
Well, yeah, exactly. The only thing that's really recognizable to me, and I'm only guessing here, but that looks like Sun Emperor, right? In the panel between those two.
Sure.
Right? So, okay, but then the rest of it's just like these generic, futuristic-looking structures. So
Yeah.
this could be the 30th century for all we know, but it's supposed to be. Well, I guess some of the buildings look a little more 20th century than others. But anyway, yeah, I agree. It could have been stronger. But yeah, I also love the way that they show the time bubble on the next page. So the bands are going horizontally, the way they're depicting them going through time. And the top part of that page and on the previous page, they're more circular to suggest the bubble kind of displacing time or something like that. So that's kind of neat. But then as they are coming out of the time stream, that bubble actually goes down through the bands, which seems kind of odd at first, but I like that weirdness factor of that, because time is not just linear, right? It's more than that. I won't get into the Doctor Who references, but I thought that was a nice way of depicting the descent or the arrival, or however you want to put it, of them arriving into the 20th century. So
yeah. I have big notes about this.
Okay, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so Shady says, "What happened to the beautiful rainbows of color?" Now we are seeing color. They're not necessarily in the rainbow thing. I think.
True.
I think Lido might have paid a little bit more attention to that bit of dialogue. However, I do think it's right. Like the way we usually see time travel is a little more. It's a little simpler, right? So that children can understand. It's like rainbow colors with all the years.
Yeah.
Actually written, right?
I always love that.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's wonderful. But it does, again, speak to what Chronarch was saying about how, like, this is sort of like a meta commentary that DC is having, is not going to allow time travel to be so easy. And Elminat even says it, because it's as though the very nature of time has changed. Well, we are 3 months after the end of Crisis, number 12, and the new rules are being written as we speak. So this is going to be something I'm going to add to my list of, like, not necessarily subplots, but little things I want to check on throughout the Legion history, or the next couple of issues. What is time going to be? Because it's going to play a big part in a future story. So, and this is where I said, I wonder if this is where DC made the decision to talk about time in the Legion. Like they said to Paul Levitz, hey, throw some of that stuff in there because we want people to know. And some of it might have also played out in, like, Who's Who, right? Like there could have been some stuff in there, but I just don't remember. Now, as they enter Superboy's time, the scene that you're depicting in those last three panels on 17, you see the little blip, the little hospital electrocardiogram monitor blip?
Yeah. I had missed that before. I had missed that before.
So, and we see it in the next page too, on page 18, when they actually arrive, we see like blip, which is cool, right? Like that means that they've arrived where they want to go. Okay. Mm-hmm. Here's my little headcanon. That's the time trapper putting a little boundary and throwing them into the pocket universe.
Yeah, that's how I took it as well.
Right? I don't think that's exactly what's going on, because we're like a good 15 issues until we get to that, right? Or 14 or 15 issues. I don't think that's Levitz throwing it in this early. If it is, he's a genius.
Well, now, you'll have to remind me. Like you said at the top of the show, we had covered Legionnaires 3 in the Tales episode just prior to this. Mm-hmm. The Time Trapper is featured prominently in that, and he makes menacing remarks towards the Legion in that book, and then we come to this, and this is my question to you about the sequence of events. So does this issue follow the final issue of Legionnaires 3? Did
yes.
they? okay, so Legionnaires 3 number 4 was published, and then issue 23 was published after that, right?
Right. It might even been done by issue 22. I just don't remember.
Okay. So if one read the Legionnaires 3, then you come to this, it's like, well, yeah, this is what we the potential of what the Time Trapper is threatening. This is it. This has got to be it, right?
I mean, it could be. I feel like it's more of hindsight for me because of what we know is going to happen, like with the Superboy story and all that.
Right.
Because I mean, when they go into Superboy's time on the next page, I wrote in my notes, this is the Legion's first trip back to the past after the crisis, right? Like this is it. And that means they're going to, Cosmic Boy is going to the post-crisis DC universe. But when they go back to Superboy's time, they're going back from here on out. They're going to be going back to that strange pocket universe that they came up with down the road. Because again, Man of Steel hasn't come out yet. The books that we're reading Legion of Superheroes 23. If my notes are correct, this came out in March of 1986, and the Man of Steel stuff came out in June of 86. So they might have had discussions about it, but we haven't actually seen. I don't think they're working on those issues yet, where they actually finally talk about what is the true inspiration of the Legion. So I think part of it is headcanon. Like I said, if it is Levitz continuing that tie, as you said, from Legionnaires 3 to this, then he's a mad genius. I love him for it. But I love that little blip. When I saw it, I was like, again, I haven't read this in a long time. I was like, oh, they're doing it. And if they're not doing it, I'm going to make it in my headcanon that they are doing it, that they're going back to the pocket universe. That's so cool.
It has to be that.
Right. And if people are like, what the F is the pocket universe? We'll get there.
I can't wait.
We'll talk about it. You want to finish up page 18 when is there anything on that where they're actually at Superboy's time? I really don't have anything for that. Other than, like I said, it's the first trip back post-crisis.
I actually want to jump back to the previous page because I had a question for you about this thing that's hurtling their way at the bubble. And Element Lad disperses it, turning it into gas. And they make some comment about the laws of physics may have changed. What the heck is that tablet thing? Do you know?
No, I don't think. I think it's just supposed to be like generic artifact.
Okay. Because it bears a certain resemblance to the thing from the Eye for an Eye storyline, those tiles that they used in that revenge map or whatever you want to call that thing. So that
was more of like a circle though, wasn't it?
It was, but yeah, it's just a weird, I mean, for me, it was just a little too close to the way, I don't know, the way that it's drawn kind of reminded me of that. I don't know. It's just an oddball thing that they throw in here and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. So I was trying to impart some sort of meaning that perhaps there doesn't require it.
I think the meaning is just that it does affect them.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah. Like they don't know the rules of time anymore. Something is completely changing. Yeah. You want to do page 19? We get the follow up with Vi and Ayla. Anything on there?
Just again, their conversation. So this is depicting more of what we've already talked about between those two. Ayla comes across to me as not so sure of herself. You know, she makes the comment about, well, she's describing what we already know, maybe, or we'll know. So we're getting some foreshadowing here, talking about bringing Mon-El into waiting in the part of the zone nearest Earth until Brainiac finds a cure. Or am I being silly? Which that was a weird question coming from her. And then this little bit here. Shrinking Violet says, "Listen to yourself and you'll know the answer." And Ayla gets up from her seat. You know, they're just sitting a foot apart or something like that. gets up from her seat, puts her arm around Shrinking Violet and gets really close and says, Violet, you're one tough lady. Just, I don't know, just the way that they are interacting, the physicality of it, and the look on Shrinking Violet's face. She's slyly amused, I guess. I know, it's just
she's in love. Levitt's saying he didn't have it.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to bring that up. It's just like, it's so, I mean, yeah, hindsight, whatever. It's so obvious where this is going.
Right. And it's great. It's a great friendship. It's exactly, it's shadowless. Shrinking Violet saying, you don't need those thoughts. That's a dumb way to think of yourself, because that whole, or am I being silly? That's kind of like Silver Age dialogue almost, right? Like, when Phantom Girl or like one of the female characters would be like, oh, I have an idea. Let's do this, this, and this. And it turns out to be the right thing to do. But then they go, oh, but no, maybe not. And then they're like, no, you're right. It's like, show confidence. Don't say that. Don't question it. No, you're right. Right? Like, and that's what I think Shrinking Violet is saying. Like, no, you're right. Don't think of it. Don't listen to yourself. You're right. So, yeah, it's great. I also love what you said about in the synopsis, like, Magnetic Kid. Remember him? Such a non-character.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, just a reminder. Hey, this guy actually exists. Right. It could have been any other Legionnaire.
I'm fairly certain. I thought one of the original pages said that this was Lido. I think it's Lido. It's really getting hard to tell. The spaceship does look like Lido, but the character work kind of guess it's Lido. Yes, I'm a little confused at if this is. I mean, he did draw the earlier scene, so it does make sense. But DeCarlo's artwork kind of makes it hard to tell if it's Lido or.
Yeah, I think DeCarlo's doing a little, or imparting a little bit too much of himself on this page, and the next sequence too.
And I sort of feel like that happens to the rest of the book, which makes me think, is it a time crunch? Lido's backing away from doing sort of like full pencils and maybe just going into some breakdowns or looser pencils.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking on that particular page for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to take us to the next two?
So yeah, this is where the Legionnaires are looking for the secret underground passage to Superboy's home, which I've always loved that about Superboy. He has that tunnel, and it's appeared before in Legion stories. I think most prominently the one, or at least maybe one of the first stories I read, was the one with them escaping back through time to avoid Mordru. And Shadowlass was part of that then too, I believe. And so it's kind of neat that she's part of this now. I like the way that the bottom part of that page gets closer and closer to the characters as they all join in to open up this apparently very heavy doorway to the passageway. So that was kind of neat.
Silver Age Superboy history.
Yeah. I love that. I love Superboy. I've always enjoyed that depiction of that character more than the adult version, and mostly for him being in the Legion. Really, quite honestly.
Yeah. Well, don't love him for too long.
Yeah. No, the love remains, Peter.
Well, that was so cool about the next page too. Like, I feel like, they even say to him, well, it's getting harder to communicate with you. Again, there's that time thing just getting sort of knocked over readers' heads, that there's something going on. And again, if we keep to this is the first time that they're going back either to the Pocket Universe or the post-crisis DC Universe, whatever you want to call it. I love that this Superboy feels very Silver Agey. He's got the smile, and he's like, oh, who is this? Oh, Dawnstar, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's going to be interesting to see the few times he does show up in the next year and a half, which I don't think is much, just to see if they're keeping that going. This relic from another time. All right, so let's go to page 22, 23. We're back into the Phantom Zone, those same kind of great Steve Lytle panel designs like you talked about earlier, which is so great. Another callback to Mon-El wanting to disperse his phantom self into so many atoms. There's a lot of desperation here. I mean, it's kind of the same beats. He doesn't want to get trapped. He wants to die. He's getting more manic, just like those first couple pages where he's sort of flipping through his emotions. And I like that, the artwork of all that white against the color is not easy. You sort of got to make sure you're putting your foreground characters against the background, and it's just great. It's not much. I don't have any other notes other than I really like this sequence.
Well, and you mentioned the panel stuff. That first page here of that sequence, the things are really angular, but they're all close together. It's almost like a segmented circular pattern if it was much bigger. But there's an order to it, and his Mon-El he's thinking about what's going on with himself and how he wants to deal with it. So it's very ordered in that way. But then on the next page, because Phantom Girl and Tellus have arrived, or I guess just Phantom Girl at first, but suddenly that bit of order that he's experiencing fractures. And because of the emotional, just the emotion that he's going through, and the next page reflects that in the panel, the way the panels are broken up and they're different shapes. And again, I gush, but it's so good the way that Lytle is depicting the emotional stability of this character, just through the page work, the panel work. I dig it.
Okay, it's page 24 and 25. Here we go. We're back into the time bubble with they've pulled Superboy from his century, and they're going back to the 30th century. And what did you? I know what I'm going to say about these two issues, but I really want to know what your thoughts were when you read these two pages, these Jonah Hex cameo.
Ah, boy. Okay, so. Was this just a simple matter of the Jonah Hex comic wasn't doing so great, so let's put him in our second best-selling book and drum up some sales? Is there some sort of larger story at play?
Blatant Hex promotion?
Yeah, or are we going to get a future Hex Legion crossover? What the heck was this?
This issue, so the Hex issue that this footnotes to, issue number 10, came out a week before the Legion issue, I think, if my research is correct. And on the Hex issue, right on the cover, it even has that, a surprise appearance by the Legion of Superheroes. So that, to me, yes, it absolutely seems like it's a cash grab, right? And I will say, later issues of the Hex, in fact, the very next issue, issue 11, features a character, a Batman of the future. So it does feel like they're trying to make people be aware of it. It probably wasn't doing so hot. The many Jonah Hex fans that were like, I don't want to read about Hex in the future. I want to read Hex in the Wild West, I also think there's something about it that is a little bit more in-story or DC commentary, I guess you could say. Let me first hit on this. So Superboy also comments, I've never seen the time stream like this. And it's like, yeah, of course you haven't, because the time stream that you used to go through has been changed, So I love that. First of all, that's awesome. This version of Jonah Hex in the future, I think the reason why they did it is, and it's clunky, it's very clunky, is because they're trying to cement that this Hex series does play into DC continuity. So they throw the Legion of Superheroes in there to say this Hex series has weight to it. It does mean something. Mm-hmm. Because even in Crisis number 12, when Harbinger in those last few pages is talking about the future of the DC universe, how certain things had changed. There was no longer going to be Jack Kirby's Great Disaster. Commandy was going to turn into the Tommy Tomorrow character. But they also showed Jonah Hex. I'm fairly certain they showed him at the end of issue 12 to be part of DC's future history. So much like Bendis's Millennium issue that took us through DC's future, this is sort of like DC's way of saying, yes, Hex is part of our future. And the way we're going to show that is by throwing the Legionnaires in there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not. It's blatant and
clunky.
Very clunky. But that's fine. They also make the comment here, maybe it has something to do with the last years of history, the ones we almost have no records of. And I've always known that as to be sort of like a Legion nugget, but I wondered if that's something that had constantly been going on. Have you you've read more than I have. Is this something that they always said, or is this like the first time we're sort of seeing it?
No, my sense of it is, my recollection is that this is not the first time that I've encountered that sentiment. So this is just a nice for me, from my perspective, a nice continuation of that which we've already been introduced to. What that history is or whatever is, it's always, I've always felt it's been one of those things like, you can travel through time. Why not tell some stories along, in that arena, but they never did. So, but regardless, this is a very familiar thing to me. Yeah. And that panel that you're talking about where they mention that, again, I like what they do with that. Where, the time bubble is going through these bands, but they're compressing as they get closer to this point that they break through into the 21st century. I thought that was a nice visual way to represent that too.
Yeah. And Superboy saying maybe the time barrier is getting tougher for machines, but it's still no match for a Superboy because pre-crisis Superboy was a power beast. And that's something this is all set up, whether conscious or not, this is going to be a lot of stuff we will bring back again in another year and a half of issues. All right. Want to take us home with the last couple pages here? What do you got?
Well, so this is, to me, this was a very quick wrap up to what we've gotten so far.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I even understand exactly what happened, but that's okay.
Exactly.
That's not the point.
Yeah, exactly. It's comic books, Peter. Yeah. So, Superboy just pops in and he's arrived in the lab, and this is the point where it starts for me. It just like, what does this mean? Because Dreamgirl says no time, no time for explanations. Basically, just step in here, and she has this pose like some sort of Price is Right person saying, "Step this way." But then they totally bypass that on the next page when Brainiac 5 basically extracts some blood from Superboy, and then that's when they cure Mon-El. So it's just this weird pseudo super science thing that I'm not quite sure why they had to depict it that way, but they did. But beyond that, they explain that the kryptonite cells will negate the lead poisoning permanently, and then it's over. But you do get a gathering of pretty much all the characters we've seen thus far, and maybe more than that. Oh yeah, Sensor Girl is there. She's just in the background, but yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else to this one for you?
I think for me, it's interesting. Here's my takeaway. All right. Mon-El has pre-crisis Superboy blood in him. Right?
Okay.
So in future Mon-El stories, especially in like the time of Valor and maybe in the 5 years later, but I'm not sure, they often refer to him as the most powerful humanoid in the universe. I want to say you really got that maybe from some like later Who's Who stories or Secret Files or well, Secret Files wasn't around. Maybe like the Who's Who Deluxe or the Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes. I didn't look it up, but there was this whole notion of, Mon-El being the even more than Superman, like being, the most powerful humanoid. And I'm going to now always go back and go, yeah, that's because he has pre-crisis Superboy blood in him. So it's not a lot, but that's sort of like just an off comment. But I liked when the scene came up, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Like, what, does retconning and rebooting mean that his blood changes too? I guess. I don't know. But that all happened after the end of Crisis, so until they get rebooted again, or until the universe gets rebooted again, I'm going to always think that Mon-El has kryptonite blood in him. Pre-Crisis kryptonite blood, which is powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. The only other thing I have is just for the last page.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have anything for that?
Now, see, this is where I wish they had spent more time on other aspects of the story than some of these other pages. Because, okay, crisis averted, which we knew would happen, but then it's, what they say, some days later. You know what? I guess I would have liked a little bit more of Mon-El reflecting on what he went through and why he reacted that way and how he's feeling now. And it was really just a glossing over of that in this scene, which, I guess that's fine, generally speaking, because, they're going to move on with the story. This is, like you said at the beginning, they're wrapping up a subplot that's been brewing for a few issues now. And then they just shove Sensor Girl at us out of nowhere at the very end, the last two panels. That again, that's fine, but it's just like we just went through a really interesting development in Mon-El's history and his psyche, and but now we're gonna direct your attention to this other subplot that we've been brewing for a while. I found it a bit annoying.
Yeah, it's abrupt, and it kind of makes me think of like, this is sort of why this issue might have been hodgepodgey in the way they put it together, because it might be a story that would have been done a little earlier in near the end of Levitz's Lytle's run. But then he's like, okay, I'll come back and do this. And so they had to put this little teaser in for the next story arc. So it sort of makes sense. I think even when he says to Shady, like, oh, I saw something, but no, maybe it was just my mind. Like, okay, sure. Maybe, the craziness of the Phantom Zone, the way he was all delirious. I don't know. That's the frustrating thing. Where it's like, no, he would have told her, even if it was sort of like a crazy thing that he saw. Like, what did he see? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's such a red herring.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tease. I can forgive him for that. I understand your point about like, what's the post, what happens after. And, I want that too. We don't get that ever. And that is another sort of, if I had to give this issue a little bit of a fault, that's a fault too. But I don't mind it as much, because I think, as all Legion stories, especially in the Silver Age, it's really about the journey to get to that last couple pages. And then, everybody winks and laughs and goes on, just like in Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
They get back onto their mission and they go to the next planet. So
sure.
And that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't take away from what I think is really just a great issue.
Oh yeah. The strength of this issue definitely is not the ending, and so that strength makes up for it mostly in my mind. So I'm good with it.
Yeah. And then we get the next issue, Suspicion, your last chance to guess Sensor Girl's true identity. Dun, dun, dun. We didn't really. A lot of the feedback from letter writers, they kind of were all said the same thing. You know, it was a good issue. It was a great issue. They enjoyed it. So I didn't pull too much from reader reactions about this issue.
I did. There was one letter that I saw from a Mr. Kevin Leahy. He brought up a couple interesting points that I thought might be interesting to point out. But he made a point about how certain characters have trouble dealing with death because of their invulnerability. But I don't know, maybe I misread what he was writing, but I didn't take what was going on with Mon-El as a physical issue, despite the pain that he talks about from the lead poisoning. It's very much a psychological issue more than a physical one, to me, at least the way that they're depicting this in the story. And then also he, I thought this is kind of funny. He mentioned that something that is still a problem today in comic books, the fact that colorists and letters not getting enough recognition from fans. So, the more things change.
Well, the colors are damn good in this issue.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And there's a lot of words, so good on them. As I was doing some research for another podcast, I came upon this little thing that actually is kind of fun when we talk about the reprints in the newsstand issues for this series. So this is from Spectre 10 from 1988, and someone talked about how they handle bleeding on pages, like when comic art goes all the way to the edge of the pages, because in the Baxter run they can do that. It goes all the way to the edge of the pages, but when it gets reprinted, they create a border around it, right? And apparently it has something to do with the printing, where they say, at least in here, it's a complicated process answer. They can only bleed on 8 consecutive pages when it comes to newsprint. That's why they don't do it. Better none than just partial. Now, I don't know what the limitations are for printing, why newsprint can't get the bleed effect, or why it can only happen on 8 pages, but I thought that was kind of an interesting fact, because that is something I look at when I go through and compare the two issues. All the bleeding stuff gets pulled in, so there's kind of an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that is it. That's all I have for issue 23. Looking forward to wrapping up the whole Sensor Girl stuff in the next couple issues.
Well, I wanted to, before we leave the issue, there was some information in the Legion Companion book from Steve Lytle about this story.
Great.
So Lytle was asked if there were any Legion stories which he had drawn that he was especially proud of, and it is this one, issue 23, because he got the credit for co-plotting it, but the whole idea was his. So I think we've talked before about how Lytle had a certain ability with Paul Levitz to suggest things, like tell us, and he had some creative input, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so this was no different. He said, it seemed as I looked at current medicine, the human body develops immunities to things that you keep putting in your body. Eventually, you develop a certain amount of immunity to them. And I thought, well, Mon-El's been taking this drug for some time. What if his body, being this superhuman Daxamite body, has developed an immunity to this serum, which means that now it can no longer help him? So he talks about, basically what happens in this issue, putting him back in the Phantom Zone. Just the idea that this well-adjusted, most Superboy-like character of Mon-El, what if there was more to him? What if the idea of going back into the Phantom Zone terrorized him? What if it was so deeply scarring that this rational, sensible man couldn't be rational and sensible about the idea of going back into the zone? I thought, man, that just makes him such a more interesting character. He also says, I told Paul there's something that's been overlooked about this character. He spent 1,000 years waiting for his friend to save his life, waiting for Superman to develop a serum, and this is Superman's biggest failure. He never developed a serum. He put this kid in there, and every issue of Superman is an issue he fails Mon-El.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, to bring this back to what I said about the cover earlier, where you mentioned you see Superboy's arm and that's all you see of him, is this Mon-El's perception of his friend, that, some sort of representation of that sense of betrayal, maybe, certainly of failure on his friend's part to help him out. And if you contrast that with the way that Superboy is portrayed here, you mentioned the kind of like the Silver Age type smile that he has in this issue, just kind of that happy-go-lucky Silver Agey type feel. I to me that depiction on the cover, Lytle is just doing a grand job at getting into that psyche type stuff that he mentions here in the companion. So reading that after reading the issue certainly made the issue I guess have a little more depth to me than if I hadn't read that. So I really appreciate those comments.
Well, then, and there's another missed opportunity. Like, we never got Superboy's remorse of going, Well,
and it's curious too, because we saw that image of Superman in Mon-El's mind, and yet, as we know, Superboy knows that Mon-El gets out. So, why is Superman still, at this time, why is Superman still looking for a cure?
Maybe that's why Superboy never did look for a cure, because every time he went to the Legion's future, he's like, "Oh, there's Mon-El. I did it."
Oh yeah. I guess that makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, eventually I'll work this out.
Oh, what a schmuck!
Yeah. Hey.
All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode with our last segment. That was great. I doubt we'll do the page to page thing often, but that was worth it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To be able to, because like I said, lots to explore in that issue. So hopefully you all read it.
Well, and just, having Lytle back, it just, I don't mean to demean LaRocque, in any significant manner, but boy, having Lytle back on art for much of this issue, it just really highlights how strong he is, especially in comparison to other artists. So, man, it was such a delight.
Let's move into the Legion around the DC Universe at this time. We'll start, as always, with Who's Who number 16, where we get a chance to look at Mon-El, how appropriate. It came out the same
right?
Yeah. Mordru, Nemesis Kid, and Night Girl. And I don't have many notes about this at all, so let's just burn through a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
Quick cover things. I think the cover's fantastic. Mon-El is given the focus on the cover. It's by Perez.
Mm-hmm.
The letter column, once again, mentions that they wanted to do a Who's Who yearbook, which is kind of interesting. Where they would put in some corrections and whatever. I assume that turned into just doing another miniseries, as they did an update for 1987 and 1988.
Right.
There's some info about the Legion entries, about Paul Levitt's handling of the Legion entries. I also wanted to make mention of one of the contributing writers is Greg Weisman, who, if you're watching Young Justice, I think Greg is responsible for like the beginnings of the Gargoyles series. Greg Weisman is animation showrunner writer to this day.
Holy cow! Wow.
Yeah. And that's the first time his name appears as a contributing writer. He would also work in comics. He would help out some titles here and there, either as like a co-writer or he especially was a co-writer on Captain Atom. What do you have about? Let's start with Mon-El. That's the first one.
So Mon-El by Steve Lytle here. interesting. They show Mon-El with the two other, I guess, big guns, the strongest Legionnaires, Superboy and Ultra Boy.
Yeah,
that's a fairly common depiction, I guess, of the character. And of course, Shadowlass there. I mean, it all makes sense. The only thing about this particular image is his face in that upper right area. I don't know if it's because of the way that the inking is done, but it's kind of a weird look for Mon-El. I don't know what you think about that.
I didn't have a problem with that.
Okay. As far as the entry goes, though, they make mention of his expertise in biotech and engineering, and so you mentioned in the issue discussion about Dream Girl and being like the second best scientist or whatever. Mon-El did create whatever that element is that would they then incorporated into the Legion flight ring. But I was wondering, have they ever really played that up since that Adventure Comics 305 to show that ability of his? Maybe he let it kind of atrophy because he is the Superboy of the 30th century. So I don't know. Interesting side note, I guess, of his character that I don't think that they really take advantage of.
I think what I took, I don't know if, I know that they try to hit on, like, even in this entry about him being the explorer, but no, I don't know about he almost, why didn't he work on a serum himself if he's so
exactly.
Smart? So
yeah.
He's older than Superboy, or at least he should be. That made me, between his first appearance and this Who's Who, I was like, oh, right, yeah, he should be older than Superboy. And I guess many ways he does feel that way. The other thing I sort of took away is, so pronounce his name, say his name.
Largand?
No, his superhero name.
Mon-El.
Say Monday.
I know.
Right?
I know.
I should have said say the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Or second day.
Yeah. Mon-El.
So it should be Mon-El, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
But see, even when you just said it right then, you kind of put an into it. You kind of transition to that.
Mon-El. Mon-El just feels right. But if he's named after Monday, then he should be Mon-El.
That's true.
But I don't want to call him Mon-El.
No. Or Mon-El or
Mon-El. Monday. Are we supposed to say Monday?
Monday.
So these are things I think about when I do these. I don't have anything else. You want to go to Mordru?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the logo for Mordru is the same logo from his first appearance.
Oh, okay.
I looked that up.
Oh, cool.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I kind of wish Broderick didn't leave so much empty space for the background stuff, because his foreground entry, and I like Pat Broderick. I think this could have been a much more dynamic entry visually.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things I just wanted to point out. I did not realize that Mordru was, let me restart that. I didn't realize that Mordru was so tall and heavy. He's listed at 7'6" and weighs 300 pounds. Now, I've always seen Mordru depicted in various stories, maybe even just really the first appearance, where he grows to these gigantic statures, but that's because he's magical. He's doing that through magic. So I was kind of surprised to see him. I really didn't realize he was that. I guess that tall. I don't know. Maybe I just totally missed that in the issues in which he appeared. But there's that. And then what was the other thing? Oh yeah. They mentioned something in here. I can't find it at the moment. But in my notes, I have what was this untold tale of his first fight with the Legion?
Right, because that's from his first appearance.
Yeah,
where they had already trapped him.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they did that a lot in those Silver Age stories.
That's true.
Look at the Time Trapper. right? And it kind of brings that air of mystery. Now, the thing I liked about the first appearance, I didn't read it, but I just sort of flipped through it. Even in his first appearance, from whenever that was, they called him the Dark Lord back then.
That's true.
Mordru the Dark Lord. Flash forward to the 2000 JSA series by James Robinson and David Goyer and eventually Jeff Johns. The first 4 issues are about the JSA fighting the Dark Lord, who he freely admits that, I think in one of the cliffhangers, he's like, I'm the Dark Lord, I'm Mordru. And you're like, oh, Mordru's in the 20th century or 21st century.
I remember that too, reading that. I'm like, oh, wow.
Right. And I think maybe I knew that because of that Amethyst miniseries in the late 80s where we learned the origins of Mordru from the Gem World and all that. But I never knew that the connection really did go back to the first appearance, that they do refer to him as a Dark Lord. I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Nemesis Kid and Night Girl. I have nothing about Nemesis Kid. I didn't learn a thing from this century. I
didn't learn anything, but I did have questions based on what's here. But I want to say this is done by Kurt Swan and Kyle Baker, and I feel bad, Peter, because I have disparaged Kurt Swan in the past.
Oh, that's right, you have.
Right. But man, I really like this pairing of Kurt Swan and Kyle Baker on Nemesis Kid. Very well done. I really like that. So my question, Nemesis Kid developed this formula which gave him his ability, his adaptive ability. But I was kind of wondering, what was his motivation for doing this? Was it, his ability to fight one person at a time to take over the world? See, it just seems horribly inefficient.
All those early villains had terrible motivations.
Yeah, it's just bad. Yeah. not a good concept at all.
Yeah. And then the only note I have about Night Girl is again how consistent it is with what's going on in the book that we just read, because they mentioned Cosmic Boy and Night Girl going on an extended vacation, just like what we read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fun image of her too. I always appreciate the beehive look, in the background there.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I really like, and you can see it on the cover too by Perez and Giordano, that costume, that almost all black costume, just looks really cool. And I
the cat suit.
Kind of wish we would have seen more of that. And this is done by Terry Austin, which
it's cool, right?
I know Terry Austin more as an inker, so this is really neat to see.
Yeah.
The whole thing. And then at the bottom there, one of the background images with the substitute heroes, she's carrying Stone Boy. And and this is the Giffen inspired look of the team. So I thought that was kind of a neat callback too.
Right. Love a girl in a full cat suit. It's probably why I like Shadowlass so much too. Like when they finally put her in the all black, totally covering everything. It's like, yeah, I dig that. I'm a sucker for a little bit of a goth look. That's good. Leather, whatever. Yeah, so as far as entries go, not they were fine. They were fine this time around. Then we've been looking at Booster Gold number 5 because there is some Legion connections, especially with like the next issues coming up, which Eric, once we figure out what issues they are, we're going to probably want to read them because they're going to have some strong Legion connections. We get a few Legion flight rings. We start to get a little bit more about Booster himself, things like dialogue where he says, "When we first arrived, I felt like we were walking through a history vid. The architecture and general atmosphere all seemed so old." And Skeets, his little flying sidekick, saying, "You must think and act as though you were born in 1966. So first of all, that means he's only 20, which is crazy. But they're starting to show that he's from another era. We just don't quite know where, and we don't even know, how far into the future he's going to be. So Like I said, just not a lot happened in the issue, but we get some things about his past. And next issue, we get the origin of Booster, and I'm sure there'll be some Legion connections there. And I think that's where we're going to end the episode this time for this. We have some feedback that I do want to get to, but I think we'll save it for next episode because we're running a little long here. So okay. I don't have anything else.
Neither do I.
Good. So coming up, Legion of Superheroes episode and issue number 24. We are now going to hit the Who is Censor Girl mystery. We're going to get an answer. So if you've been playing along, if you've been reading with us, and you don't know who she is by now, you definitely will in the next couple issues. Are these issues you've read before?
No.
Ooh,
no, I mean, okay. Obviously, as if people have been listening to the show for a little while now, I know the reveal. I know who it is, but that's just because I came in to the Legion at a later point and there was references and whatnot, and probably some comic book press that I read back then. But no, I've not read these issues. I have no idea how it plays out, and so I'm looking forward to experiencing that for the first time.
Okay. And I believe you have that checklist handy of all the clues that they mentioned somewhere in one of the future letter columns. So not for next issue, but the following issue, we'll definitely have to pay attention to that list. All right. So if you want to send us email, peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
Any final thoughts here, Eric?
No, I think that's good. It was very nice to get to read a really good issue of the Legion of Superheroes, especially considering what's been going on. It was a nice respite for me personally. So it was great talking with you about this as well.
Awesome. And as always,
long live the Legion Project Podcast.
See ya.
Bye, Peter.